It's been said that you can't have ideals without first having idols. And if you look at history, there's so many times where we get words from ancient gods, and that's a great example. Ideals is actually essentially a derivative of the word idols. So symbols create the foundation for abstract things that maybe we wouldn't understand if we didn't have something to symbolize them with. To me, when I look at people who are religious, I look at their faith kind of like somebody who is a fan of a video game franchise, only they think it's real, right? Like, imagine if I was a fan of the Elder Scrolls, only instead of being really into the lore because I think it's cool, I'm really into the lore because I think it's real. I could still be inspired by it. I could still gain the same sense of value, but it would be more intense and more focused on just one particular thing, because I would think, Tamriel is actually real, and Nirn is a real place, and the 8 divines are real deities and things like that. So, do I think it's rational for people to believe in religious things? Not really. I think that people have it in their nature to believe in things. And so I don't fault them for that. I think it's just part of the human experience as a whole. And yet, personally, I don't feel that it's a rational path to take to believe in things simply because you've been brought up that way, or people have tried to convince you that you need to believe in those things, or it's just comfortable to do so. And yet, I also feel like if you don't believe in anything, that's kind of worse. So there's this happy medium of being able to understand that faith doesn't have to be reliant on something being physically real or verifiable. You don't have to believe in Santa Claus literally in order to believe in Santa Claus figuratively. You don't have to necessarily believe in all of the teachings of Christianity literally in order to believe in the teachings of Christianity figuratively. At the same time, you don't have to believe that every single thing about those teachings is good. You can mix and match. You can pick and choose what you're inspired by and what you want to leave on the table because it's not healthy. We have a new Anno game coming out soon, and it's going to be set in ancient Rome. So I was looking at people's discussion of this on Reddit today, and there was a discussion about whether slavery should be included in the new Anno game. And my opinion on this is, I guess I'm neutral. If there was slavery in there, I would be fine with it because that's a legitimate part of history, and it would be realistic. But if there isn't, I'm fine with that too, because the Anno franchise is always focused on painting a very optimistic view of the periods that it represents. It isn't about being gritty to the point of being depressing. There's opium trade, for example, that happened in the 1800s, and yet we can still say that the Enlightenment era, the Victorian era, was a really beautiful time. There was a lot of blight and problems in society. There were people who were left behind in society and economics. There were health problems. There were a lot of things wrong about the 1800s, for example, that we aren't trying to ignore. And yet, when I sit down to play a game set in that setting, it's really nice to focus on the pretty parts of it, the inspiring parts of it, the parts of it that were really, really amazing. It doesn't mean that we ignore or don't believe in the things that were perhaps shameful or negative. It's just you don't have to focus on those things necessarily. And to go back to my original topic, as we look at things like religion, Christianity has done a lot of things that are bad. Islam has done a lot of things that are bad. That doesn't mean that we can't appreciate and meditate on the things that those systems of teaching and belief give us that are good. We can take the good and leave the bad. And taking the good doesn't mean that we're passively endorsing the bad. But that's where being pragmatic as an agnostic, I'm able to do that. But someone who believes in something in a religious sense, they're not able to do that. And so then there's this sense of, I guess, inner conflict, incongruity. There's the sense of paradox or the frustration because different ideologies and belief systems don't mesh very well. It's sort of like if I said, I'm a fan of the Elder Scrolls and I'm a fan of the Lord of the Rings. So how do those two game worlds or fantasy worlds fit together? How does the land of Middle Earth pertain to the land of Tamriel? Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer because the reality is they don't really have anything to do with each other. And yet they do have something to do with each other because they both draw off of this human desire to use allegory and symbolism to paint a picture of the esoteric. They're all various interpretations of abstract ideas and philosophies that are real, that are meaningful. So there's common themes, but that doesn't mean that the things themselves, the stories, the teachings, the franchises are necessarily going to be directly connected. So in a religious sense, maybe we would say that Islam, Christianity, Eastern religions, all of the diverse philosophies of the world are reflecting human meditation on universal principles that are legitimate. But none of them are perfect because none of them are really right, exactly. They're just different perspectives that all paint an imperfect picture of abstract things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to wrap our heads around. There's a lot of people who look at life through a very analytical lens. Everything is all about being based and grounded in reality. But if you only look at reality, at some point you have to face the fact that it's empty. It feels kind of meaningless if you don't have something spiritual to fall back on. Then all you're doing is chasing your career, or you're chasing some sort of external thing that you think is going to elevate you, and you're not really going to actually have a good experience in life, because life is meant to be more spiritual than material, and we know this. It's more about looking up at the sky at night and having a sense of wonder. It's not about what the stock market is doing necessarily. That's not the meaning of life. It's a part of life. But if all you're looking at is material things, and the only thing you think has value is material things, well, then you could look at your own body and just say you are a certain number of basic compounds that together result in a mechanical reaction. But does that give us a sense of meaning in life? No. If we say all we are is a collection of different materials, then where is that sense of soul? That sense that we are spirits and not animals? If we don't believe that, then why are we doing the things we're doing? So we need a sense of faith to guide us. And that's where I think that there's this middle ground that's very important. And that is to be able to walk away from religion, to walk away from that sense that you have to believe in something absolutely, but also to not go ditch to ditch and to abandon a sense of faith in favor of absolute materialism, to where you no longer believe that there is any purpose in anything imaginative or spiritual. It's important for us to have a sense of wonder, a sense that we're part of something greater than ourselves alone, to be pragmatic, to be able to say, maybe the things that we believe in, the things that give us a sense of purpose and passion and excitement and wonder in life, maybe those things are not real in the literal sense, but they're real in the ways that matter, because they help us to understand that we are important, and that philosophy is important, that thinking about life is important, that we exist for some means higher than just advancing ourselves materially and existing and then dying, that we have some higher purpose. And fantasy gives us a pathway into that, a casual pathway, a pathway that's not tied to a specific ideology, but it gives us a way to interface with the divine in some way. And I think it's interesting how you could go study theology, or you could go study gaming lore for your favorite franchise, and surprisingly, it's actually kind of similar, because it's all exploring a form of philosophy. It's using abstracts as a way to understand principles that we otherwise wouldn't be able to really put our finger on. And there was a quote I really loved. Somebody said, birds wouldn't have an instinct to migrate south if there was no south for them to go to. So when we think about things that inspire us, things that we enjoy, things that speak to us on some level and make us keep on coming back, it's not because we just are immature, or we didn't grow up, or we're addicted to stupid things. It's that there's some part of our spirit that knows that we're more than just the mere sum of our parts. And so we're always looking for ways to visualize that, to understand that in a new way. Someone made a lore video about the Elder Scrolls, and they said, when you look up at the night sky in the Elder Scrolls universe, the stars aren't actually supposed to be celestial bodies. They're not stars or planets as we would understand them scientifically. According to legend, they're essentially holes in the tapestry of the heavens. They're holes where we can look through the canvas that is the sky and see the light of the divine peeking through. Because the gods fell from their immortal plane and came to Earth. And when they came to Earth, they punctured holes in the heavens. And now we as mortals live looking up at those holes in the sky, and those are the stars. And the gods are among us, and we build monuments and idols to those gods. Not because we worship the idols, but because we need something to anchor us to the divine. Because we can't picture the divine, we can't understand it. And so we build monuments, we build towers, which help us to understand the ineffable. And that's just a little bit of gaming talk, I guess, but it's really true though in life. Now we look as through a glass darkly. But then one day, the Bible says, we will see God face to face. And God is just the sum of all things which are, all that ever has been, all that ever will be. And we are perhaps three-dimensional creatures living in a five-dimensional universe. We can't understand what it really is all about. And so we create idols. We create ideals. We create things which help us to picture the things that you can't draw in a three-dimensional world. And yet we know, because we sense them, that they are real. Whether we use a fantasy landscape to visualize them, or we use a religious teaching to visualize them, we have this sense that life is an exciting thing, that's meaningful, it's something worth living, it's something worth being part of, it's something worth sharing together. And I think I would rather go to a gaming convention and hang out with a bunch of nerds. I'd rather spend time with all of the people who the successful of the world might say are losers. I'd rather spend time with those people than to spend time with the folks who are so busy accomplishing things and being self-important that they can't just feel a sense of devotion and wonder in the experience of living. Whether it's getting lost in your favorite video game or just going outside and looking up at the sky and breathing the cool air and admiring the constellations. It's important not to be so defined by something that you are imbalanced, but it's also important to be able to just step back and really be at peace and enjoy the experience. And I think we do best when we gather that experience from a lot of different sources. Not just one religion, not just one source. You know, you'd be hard pressed to find any one thing that checks every single box and doesn't leave room for more interpretation, that doesn't leave some questions unanswered, that doesn't leave you looking for something else to enrich your spirit experience with more in different ways. Diversity of experience is important. And so, to end this ramble, what I'm really getting at is that on one hand, you have this ditch of people who are really materialistic, and then on the other ditch, you have people who believe in something more like organized religion. And people tend to look at life through one or the other of those two lenses. And I think the important thing is to let go of those two extremes. Doesn't mean that you don't care about material success in life, because we have to figure out how to live. It doesn't mean that you abandon religion, because there's a lot of beauty in religious teachings. But somewhere in the middle is that sense of fantasy, that sense of being immersed in something that is not real, while also understanding it's not real and not taking it too seriously, but knowing that it represents something real. Just like Santa Claus, not a real fat man that goes down the chimney and teleports all over the world with toys, but it's a real idea. It's a real idea that can guide us in our lives to be more good, more kind, more giving, more generous, more serving. Fantasy can be a way to remind us that there is more to life than meets the eye. And even if we don't understand how to connect all the dots, we're still part of something greater than ourselves. And we're still part of something that is amazing and a legacy that's filled with hope. Even when we sometimes don't feel a sense of hope, it's there, it's around us. And we're not alone in life's journey. So to me, when I look at video games and fantasy literature, I think it's just as real as a tool for personal growth as any religious experience is. I think it's just as important as part of a healthy lifestyle as focusing on things like your career, your job, your money, stuff like that. Really, the only reason why we work is so that we can live, right? If we don't contemplate the purpose of our existence, then what's the point of us working to exist? There has to be an end, a purpose, that after all the bills are paid and the work is done, we contemplate life at a higher level. I was reminded of a story of a guy who was playing World of Warcraft, I think, in a hospital room, and he had cancer, and he was fighting that, going through a very rough time in his life, and he was sharing online how being able to still play that MMO was a very meaningful thing to him. And I think, how do you look at something like that and not say that that's not a meaningful spiritual experience? It really is. It's like this Bible verse where someone asked Jesus about his family, and Jesus looked around at the people that were right around him, and he said, these are my mother and my sister and my brother. Meaning, it's not about who you're connected to by blood, it's about who you're connected to in spirit. And when you're surrounded by kindred spirits, that's your family. Because you can have a blood relation to somebody and they do shady things, crazy things, unkind things, cruel things. They're not there for you. That's not your family. Your family is the people who share your values. And likewise, what is true religion? What is the true meaning of life? Well, it's not necessarily serious things. It's not necessarily the establishment. True religion, what really matters, it's the things that help you to have a sense of peace, a sense of wholeness in the world, a sense of being connected to something that's meaningful and fun and inspiring in a world that's often not inspiring and maybe doesn't feel fun. To have something that you can escape to. Like that kid that runs home from school and is just counting down the minutes until he can get on the computer to go play his favorite video game. And you would say, well, he's just an immature kid. But that's not really true. He's inspired by something that feels really, really cool. And he doesn't even necessarily know why it feels so cool. It just does. And that is a spiritual experience. Because when you put it on paper and you say, let's add up all the reasons why this matters, you can't really come up with a lot of reasons why it matters. And yet, deep down inside, you feel like it's important to you. Those are the things that you should spend your life doing. The things which enrich the human spirit. And those are the things which you should build your connections with others around. If all of our social connections, our personal pastimes, all the ways we spent our time were things that inspired us, and we were sharing those experiences of inspiration with others, and we cut out all of the things that are toxic or harmful or discouraging and eliminated that in favor of things that are more inspiring to us, well, life would be better. And that's really why I think it's so important to keep alive that sense of adoration for fantasy and for imagination. Because what is life if you don't have imagination to keep you grounded, to keep you sane, to give you a sense of joy in the world and a sense of symbolism to offset the materialism of a cynical world. Always stay attached to things that inspire you. Remember, life has loveliness to sell. So, as always, buy it and never count the costs. Till next time, thanks for watching.